Okay, the first thing I like to do is imagine my money-related stress as the most disgusting, terrifying creature I can think of. Ugly, greasy little creature with a hooked nose and oily black hair.
Oh, he is scary.
I call him the Gravis.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to the OCast. Today, we're talking about greed on the OC Podcast, the world's #1 Bible-based music business podcast. So we just had Valentine's Day recently, and we also had my 2-year anniversary for my Manifesto CD release. So to show my love to y'all, I'm going to upload the entire full uncut Manifesto album for streaming anytime you want, completely for free, on YouTube. Of course, I have more Saxophone Legends videos, more unfiltered EP tracks coming out, just all kinds of stuff. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you like the best so we can keep doing more of that. So our first story on the topic of greed is Rage Against the Machine. Rage Against the Machine is a band known for being very against the system, anti-establishment. But now we have Rage Against the Machine playing at the Capital One Stadium, and a lot of their fans who are, I guess, broke punk rockers and such, they kind of view this as a selling out type of move. So the question is Rage Against the Machine really selling out? Have they had some sort of major change of heart? Are they now tools and puppets of big government and big billion-dollar corporations? Well, in a sense, yes, because they are kind of a tool of their record label and their distribution companies. So when an opportunity like that comes their way, I can definitely see that they're going to take it. They're a huge band, but once you sold 1 million records or whatever, it's not like that money just keeps rolling in and rolling in. So I would actually happen to disagree with this assessment. If anything, they're using their platform as a super recognizable, super high-level rock band to get their message out to the largest amount of people in the most efficient way. So I would actually applaud Rage Against the Machine for bringing their message of speaking truth to power, fighting against the system. I applaud them for bringing that message to the biggest stage they possibly can. And if all of y'all out here are going to continually criticize a band just because their ticket price is a certain arbitrary amount higher than what you can afford, then you're going to start to see less and less and less bands that are speaking out with this kind of messaging. And I think we're already starting to see that in the musical landscape of 2020. So this genius, Philip, says, yo, $125 for the lowest ticket price for Rage Against the Machine. Maybe Rage Against the Machine has now become part of the machine. No, maybe you're just broke and dumb. Rage Against the Machine tickets are $250 and up. More like Rage with the Machine, am I right? I mean, $250, like you'd think they asked him to put a lien against his house or something. So at the end of the day, Rage Against the Machine, in my view, not being greedy. They're just shouting their message from the highest treetop, as a very wise millionaire once told me. I think the only ones being greedy in this case are the geniuses on Twitter tweeting back and forth with all their broke friends about how expensive this concert is and how it's the band's problem and not my problem for being poor. Next, music news. We're talking about the DMCA abuse on the part of these huge social media conglomerates such as YouTube and others. DMCA stands for the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Now, I've made several videos on this topic on this channel, and you can watch one of them, my favorite one, right up here. Now, how are these platforms abusing the DMCA? Well, they're entering into backroom deals with huge companies, huge music publishing companies like Universal Music, Sony, etc., etc. Now, these backroom deals give YouTube the power to claim and redirect any amount of money, any amount of ad revenue, any amount of views that they want on any video that they want, whether the company owns the copyright on the material in that video or not. So essentially, I can upload an original song, okay? And YouTube can say, hey, this song is already copyrighted. And that copyright is owned by Universal Music Group. Now, does Universal Music Group actually own that copyright? Well, no, because I created it. I own the copyright on that. but because YouTube says so, I have no choice. And the only recourse for me is to appeal the decision. And guess who has the final say on that decision? Well, of course, Universal Music Group and YouTube. So if they don't want to give you your money back, they don't have to. The big step in the right direction here is the CASE Act. And this is a piece of legislation that was introduced into Congress in order to give sort of a trial for resolving copyright disputes. Now, in my opinion, I don't really think the CASE Act will change much, because how many people can they really help at one time? So it's just going to be a backlog and a backlog and a backlog of case after case after case. And by the time your case actually gets heard, you will have lost all of the interest in that video anyway. So all they have to do is claim it, and you're out of luck. And if you haven't had your trial by a certain time, you're just screwed, and there's nothing you can do about it. I could be wrong. It doesn't happen often, but I could be wrong about this. However, I think just the attempt, just the acknowledgement by the Congress that this is an issue that they want to work on, I think that's, maybe a sign of good things to come down the road. So here we have the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee, and Chairman Tillis says, in the DMCA, Congress offered a revolutionary solution to these problems, granting immunity to new emerging platforms in exchange for reasonable enforcement efforts, including quickly taking down copyrighted materials and blah, 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 blah. And for a time, it worked. Well, that's arguable. But now, 2 decades later, the mechanisms enacted to achieve that goal simply haven't stood the test of time. And that's about the nicest understatement possible there. The original DMCA compromises. They keep talking about the original DMCA compromises as if it's like, well, they meant well, guys. They tried to do the right thing. Give me a break. There's no incentive for the platforms to follow the rules when they can just enter into backroom deals and get whatever they want. We are left with a broken notice and takedown system that is both generally inadequate and easily gamed through false counter notices. So what they mean by this is the smaller creators who don't have the power of billion-dollar corporations on their side, they have to enter into legal action and spend a whole bunch of money on courtroom fees just to assert that they own the copyright on something. Meanwhile, these big companies can just snap their fingers, and since they're best buds with Susan Wojcicki and YouTube, then they can just have whatever they want, and they don't have to spend a single dime. So the author of this article encourages the Senate to move quickly in joining the House in approving the CASE Act, which I mentioned earlier. Congress should consider adding a provision which any platform containing protection under the safe harbor shall be deemed to have consented to the jurisdiction of a case tribunal, which is the case that basically hashes out between both sides who really owns the copyright, whether the infringing content is actually infringing, and whether it's okay to borrow certain types of content due to fair use law. Newsflash. It is. Fair use is definitely a thing and should not be ignored, which that to me is the big issue here, is that they're ignoring that aspect of it and just letting people claim whatever they want without any kind of proof, and then they get the weighted benefit in the claim. And the author leaves us with a little bit of optimism here. He thinks we can drive innovation and creativity simultaneously. All we have to do is reforge the consensus, armed with the knowledge of more than 20 years of experience. Whether that's going to work itself out over time or not remains to be seen. But I'm not too optimistic on this story. The social media platforms, the YouTubes, the Facebooks, and what have you, they are practicing a very high degree of greed to where they can just say, well, I own that thing that you created because I said so. If that's not greed, I don't know what is. Next, music news. This is about the collapse of physical music distribution, such as CDs and vinyl, and how this is essentially costing these companies millions of dollars in lost revenue. This is a Rolling Stone article, so it's sort of a little mini episode of Rolling Stone for y'all. Steve Harkins was conducting a routine check on a shipment of records, and instead of vinyl, Harkins was amused to find that Ingram's supplier had sent a pallet packed with bottles of windshield wiper fluid. The thing that bothers him is that you didn't even have the courtesy to throw in some car wax. And then a few weeks later, Harkins received another surprise, and the second shipment that was supposed to contain music came filled with bottles of prescription cough syrup. Other orders of records and CDs arrived damaged or incorrectly packed. I guess they can get way more for a box full of prescription cough syrup than they can for a box of old vinyl. And we have another record store owner placed an order of about 700 items, and none of the albums showed up until months later. That's because Universal Music Group is just a genius, just great, well operated, all around, just spectacular. So for those of you guys who think that, CDs and vinyl and all that's dead, that, nobody, who wants that anyway, who cares? The CDs and vinyl still generated revenues of nearly $1 billion in this country in 2019. Especially for indie bands, the physical releases are often a key part of their marketing plan. I can say this is true for myself. I'm an indie artist, and without my ability to sell CDs, there's no way that I could actually turn this into something profitable, right? And so this company that you probably never heard of is responsible for making all of these messes with all of the biggest distribution companies, all the biggest record stores in the world. And we're talking about Direct Shot. The company became single-handedly responsible for more than 80% of the physical music on the market. Direct Shot is obviously not prepared to handle the volume they took on, or they're directly taking another kind of shot that might have nothing to do with CDs or vinyl, if you get my drift. So go enjoy your record stores and your vinyl shops while you can, because they are, I guess, getting cough syrup instead of vinyl records. Mike Fratt, general manager of Homer's Music in Omaha, Nebraska, is aware of the theory that the majors are trying to wash their hands of CDs and vinyl by choking the supply, but he offers a different explanation. He says, "I don't think anybody malevolently tried to hurt us. It was greed, poor management decisions, and incompetence that brought this about." All right, so there you have it, folks. 3 current, relevant examples of greed in the music industry. What do you guys think about these examples of greed? Do you have any of your own examples? Definitely leave them in the comments below. Have you been screwed over by any big record companies? Do you own a record store? Have you encountered any of these weird distribution problems? Have you ended up with drugs instead of vinyl records? Leave a comment down below and we'll keep the conversation going. I think obviously greed is running rampant in the music business, and even from the highest levels to the most bottom rung of the bottom levels, from the biggest companies that are just trying to make an extra million to the guys at the bottom level that are trying to make an extra $10 by taking advantage of some naive indie artist who just wants to feel like they have a music career. And unfortunately, it just happens to be one of those businesses where people just feel entitled to a certain level of success. So having that amount of greed it might benefit you in the short term, but I don't think that's a long-term strategy, because you're going to end up in one of these articles by the Rolling Stone, and the next thing you know, you're not getting your CDs on time, you got your fans turning against you, you got everybody looking at you funny, and you're never going to repair your reputation, because you're always going to be known as that greedy guy, that shark that just couldn't live within their means. They just had to go to that next phase of criminality. So that's my take on greed in the music industry. Make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, click it 2 times, click it 3 times if you want to be on top of all my future videos, all my future podcast episodes. My co-host is, actually, I'm not sure where my co-host is this week, but I'm going to try to be way more consistent about getting these podcasts out there, because they're informative and they contain important current information, and I also just have a blast making them and just sitting here chatting with y'all. So hit the like button down below, because I'm super greedy for all of your likes and all of your adoration, and maybe we should all be a little bit more greedy. That's how we're going to get the money.